What could be more precious to Emperor Palpatine than his very life? That was the question that echoed in the minds of every Crimson Royal Guard. To stand at the Emperor's side was already the greatest honor a soldier of the Empire could ever hope to achieve. Yet there existed an even higher station, a place beyond the throne room. Some whispered that Palpatine entrusted to these few a secret greater than his own protection, the key to the Empire itself, and the source of his unending power and influence. The secret was revealed only to the rarest of the rare, the chosen few who were elevated above their brothers, handpicked by the Emperor himself to become his champions. To join the Sovereign Protectors, for a royal guard there was no higher honor. To be raised to sovereign was to be entrusted with what the Emperor valued more than his own life. There were few titles in the Empire that carried so much hidden weight as the Sovereign Protector. The word sovereign means supreme authority, the embodiment of absolute rule, and to bear that name meant more than being a guard in crimson robes. These were Palpatine's champions, the highest order of his guard, the men he personally selected from among his most elite. Unlike the normal red-robed guard, where candidates were broken down on Yinchor until only the last survivor stood, becoming a Sovereign Protector demanded more. Survival alone was not enough. Palpatine had to see you, measure your brilliance, and handpick you himself. Every Sovereign Protector was chosen by the Emperor's eye, elevated not only for their skill, but because he judged them worthy of guarding his sovereignty. They were not simply soldiers, they were Royal Guard champions, the apex of Palpatine's hierarchy of loyalty and protection. At a glance, they resembled the Emperor's Royal Guard, silent figures in red robes and helmets, but sovereigns were set apart. Their armor bore black chest plates and gauntlets. Their helmets had a black vertical panel across the face, black capes draped over their crimson robes. Some wore ornate ceremonial armor, hoods pulled over, and carried scythe-like force pikes. The symbolism here is deliberate. Red tied them to Palpatine's throne. Black marked them as something higher, as guardians of his sovereignty itself. Chosen from the Guard, the Sovereigns underwent years of additional testing and training. Their standards were merciless: combat ability, stamina, reflexes, intelligence, and above all, loyalty. They trained in heavy blaster pistols, vibroblades, and force pikes. They flew exclusive Guard TIE interceptors. They endured psychological conditioning meant to destroy hesitation and to forge absolute devotion. They were organized under champions, leaders selected directly and only by Palpatine. There was only one man in the entire galaxy capable of raising someone to become a Sovereign Protector, and that was the Emperor himself. But the essential truth still remained. They were not simply the survivors of training, they were handpicked. Palpatine himself had to raise them above the rest, and while not all of them were force sensitive, the case of Carnor Jax makes it clear that the Emperor deliberately selected those who showed potential, folding them into his vast network of dark side adepts. But to understand the Sovereigns, we must first compare them to another of the Emperor's creations, the Shadow Guard. Both wore black, both carried pikes, both sometimes displayed abilities and aptitude in the Force, but their natures were entirely different. The Shadow Guard were assassins. They were voiceless instruments of Palpatine's will. Their entire identities had been erased. They did not speak. They existed only as extensions of the Emperor's command, hunting Darksiders who had strayed, Jedi who had survived, or enemies too dangerous for conventional troopers. They were disposable knives, terrifying but faceless. The Sovereign Protectors, by contrast, retained their identities, their brilliance, their cunning, their personality. It was all preserved and even sharpened. Palpatine trusted them not as shadows but as individuals, those who were refined into champions. And in Carnor Jax we see what a champion meant, a Sovereign Protector who retained not only his identity, but also his ambition. But what exactly did they guard? What was the greatest mystery of the Empire that not even the Royal Guards were privy to? Most imagined Palpatine's throne to be on Coruscant, but that was just theater. His true throne lay in the hidden Deep Core on a world called Byss. Byss had been reshaped by the dark side. Millions were lured there with promises of a paradise, only to be drained of their life to fuel the Emperor and his plans. And at its heart stood the Citadel. The Citadel was the true seat of sovereignty. Here were the clone labs, where new bodies awaited Sidious. Here were vaults filled with Jedi relics, Sith manuscripts. Here Palpatine composed the Dark Side Compendium, works like the Book of Anger and the creation of monsters. The Citadel also held museums, great halls for Palpatine's inner circle, sanctums where Sith holocrons like the Tedran holocron and others were studied. It was here where the Sovereign Protectors stood guard. They patrolled the clone labs, the libraries, the halls of power. They defended monasteries, palaces, and data centers from across the galaxy, all tied to Palpatine's immortality. They watched over the Eclipse Dreadnought, the mobile fortress that carried Palpatine's arsenal and his mobile throne. Their duty was not to protect his body. Their duty was to protect the Emperor's eternity. This is why sometimes Palpatine dismissed his guards. He needed no protection from assassins. His mastery of the Force made him invulnerable. The Crimson Guard at his side were mostly for display. The Sovereign Protectors were elsewhere, unseen, protecting what truly mattered. Their invisibility was not weakness, it was the essence of their role. And among them, one name pierces history: Carnor Jax. In 11 ABY, Jax was elevated to a Sovereign Protector, aided by Sarkev's quest of the Imperial Ruling Council. But Carnor was more than a champion. He secretly apprenticed under Lumaya, Dark Lady of the Sith, herself molded after Vader and Sidious. Here lies the ultimate irony. Palpatine perfected the art of training dark side adepts under his empire. Inquisitors, Shadow Guards, other apprentices, even Darth Vader. But from within that system came betrayal. Carnor Jax embraced the Sith lesson that the apprentice must destroy the master. Carnor bribed the Emperor's physician. He had the clone bodies sabotaged. Every time Sidious tried to transfer his essence, the bodies decayed rapidly. His immortality was undone by a man sworn to guard it. The betrayal echoed the rule of two: sabotage, subterfuge, the apprentice overthrowing the master. And though Jax's force potential was minor compared to true Sith Lords, weaker even than Lumaya, his brilliance and conditioning as a guard made him devastating, even against his master. Carnor Jax became one of the most overlooked yet cunning figures in all of Star Wars EU. He proved that possessing the Force alone does not decide one's destiny. A Sovereign Protector, handpicked by Sidious, used Sith methods to wound him in ways no Jedi ever would. When we compare the standard Royal Guard to a Sovereign Protector, the difference is immediately clear. The regular Guard were loyal, disciplined, deadly, but their role was ultimately ceremonial and defensive. They were trained to obey, to intimidate, and to strike if commanded. But the Sovereign Protectors were greater. They were not just guards, they were champions, the most refined and dangerous expression of the Guard tradition. He picked them not only for their martial skill, but for their intelligence, their cunning, and for their potential. Carnor Jax proves this better than anyone. No ordinary guard could have bribed the Emperor's personal physician, sabotaged Palpatine's cloned bodies, and struck at the very foundation of his immortality. That act alone shows a level of access, brilliance, and daring that is utterly beyond the Crimson Guard. Where a standard guardsman was trained to die for the Emperor, a Sovereign Protector like Jax had the ability to kill him and nearly remake the Empire in his own image. The massacre at Yinchor underscores this point further. Jax not only ordered the annihilation of the Guard's training complex, but actually survived the political fallout to position himself as the heir to the Empire. He declared himself the Emperor's successor, and in doing so demonstrated the ultimate truth. The Sovereigns were not simply the Emperor's shadows, they were his successors in waiting. At least one of them tried to be. The Royal Guard represented loyalty, the Sovereign Protectors represented power. They were the most powerful variant of the Guard ever created, and Carnor Jax embodied both their greatness and their fatal flaw. Carnor Jax embodied both the success and the failure of the Sovereign Protectors. They were too brilliant to erase, but in choosing one with ambition, Palpatine sealed his fate. Being trained by Lumaya tied him directly to Sidious's legacy. He betrayed him from within. Carnor Jax was the apex of the Guard, and its greatest traitor. The Sovereign Protectors were never ceremonial. They were not voiceless assassins like the Shadow Guard. They were Palpatine's champions. They guarded his bodies, his manuscripts, his holocrons, and even his throne world. They were sovereignty made flesh. And yet it was one of them, Carnor Jax, who betrayed him. His ambition, though fueled by limited force potential, was enough to wound the greatest Sith Lord of the age. His story proves the oldest truth of the dark side. The greater danger always comes from within. But Carnor Jax's tale does not end here. For Kirkanos, the last true Royal Guard, swore vengeance and carried the Guard's legacy into the Crimson Empire. We have told that story, the saga of the last Royal Guard, in a 40-minute video that we will link in the description below. If you want to see how Carnor Jax finally fell, and how the Guard's story ended in blood, make sure to check out that video. But anyway, lore junkies, what are your thoughts on the Sovereign Protectors? They really don't have a lot of appearances in lore, but they're extremely important, being the protectors of the world of Byss and all of Palpatine's secrets. They guarded more than his life, they guarded his eternity. Do you agree with the statement that the Sovereign Protectors are the greatest of the Royal Guard class? And as always, my friends, thank you so much for watching the channel, and may the Force be with you.